You were never meant to lead this family, Lena. That's why everything goes to your sister." My father announced it into the microphone like it was a celebration, not a public execution. 50 guests applauded. Champagne glasses clinked. Even my mother dabbed her eyes dramatically, as if this betrayal was somehow emotional for her. And my sister Audrey, missing for 5 years, dragging addiction and disaster in her wake, smiled like she'd earned it. I stared at the estate keys Dad placed into Audrey's hand. The company shares. The power of attorney document. The inheritance deed. Everything I kept alive while they were sick. Everything I rebuilt when our company almost collapsed. Everything I thought I'd done for family. Everything handed to the daughter who didn't show up for a single hospital visit. Dad raised his glass toward me. "And to Lena," he said, smirking. "Our dependable child. The one who always does the work, even if she'll never be CEO material." Laughter rippled across the room like tiny knives. I felt heat burn behind my eyes, humiliation, disbelief, a betrayal so sharp I couldn't breathe. But then something inside me shifted. A slow, cold clarity. They didn't know what I knew. They didn't know what I'd done 18 months ago. They didn't know the one line I was about to cross, the one that would change everything. I walked to the head of the table, heels echoing across the oak floor. Every eye followed me. "Dad," I said softly, "are you sure Audrey should have everything?" He rolled his eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Lena. You'll always have a place here." "No," I said. "Actually, I won't." I placed 3 items on the table: a keyring, a document, and a sealed envelope with my initials pressed into navy wax. My father frowned. "What is this, something you forgot?" I said. Then I smiled, slow, steady, devastating, because I knew what was in that envelope. I knew what signature he didn't remember signing. I knew the legal trap he and my mother had walked straight into. And I knew that the moment he tore it open, the entire Caldwell empire would tip sideways. I thought that was the end. I didn't know that within minutes the room would explode, the dynasty would crack, and the very people who dismissed me would learn exactly what happens when you underestimate the daughter who stayed. Before I continue, thank you for staying with me in this first painful moment. If you've ever been overshadowed or overlooked by your own family, your support through a like, comment, share, or even a gentle subscribe truly means more than I can express. I'm grateful you're here with me. I used to think loyalty was the same as love. When I was 9, Audrey pushed me off the dock at our lake house because she didn't like that I learned to swim before she did. Dad laughed. Mom said I was too sensitive. When I was 13, Audrey crashed my bike into a mailbox because she wanted to ride it first. I got grounded for not sharing. When I was 16, Audrey stole my college fund to take a trip to L. With her boyfriend. Dad called it a learning experience for me. She was the wildfire. I was the fire extinguisher they dragged behind her. By 22, Audrey had disappeared into addiction debt and toxic relationships. And somehow, the tragedy of her absence made her even more angelic in my parents' eyes. "She's just lost right now," Mom always said, clutching a whiskey glass like a rosary. "You could learn compassion from her," Dad added. Yes, I thought. Maybe if you gave me even a fraction of what you gave her. When Dad collapsed during a board meeting with a near-fatal cardiac arrhythmia, Audrey was somewhere on the West Coast, unreachable. Mom began radiation the same week. And suddenly, the daughter who wasn't CEO material became the one holding their entire world together. I handled the medical decisions, the insurance paperwork, the mortgage, the payroll. I negotiated with creditors when the company nearly defaulted. I stayed up until 3 a.m., rebuilding our distribution software because our old system crashed. All while my parents called me helpful instead of capable. But the day everything changed was the day I found the file. A signed, durable power of attorney, both medical and financial, granted to me. Not Audrey. Not anyone else. Me. Dad signed it during a lucid rehab session. Mom signed after passing a cognitive screening. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I needed the authority to protect them. But what I didn't know, what they didn't realize, was that Minnesota law made it irrevocable. They signed their empire over to me long before they decided Audrey deserved everything. While managing the company finances under that POAI, discovered hidden debts, frozen accounts, a near bankruptcy, a scandal waiting to explode. So I built something new, quietly, legally, completely in my name. A parallel company with modern systems, a New Deal pipeline, a contract with North Star Medical worth $78 million secured under my signature. My parents never noticed. They were too busy waiting for Audrey to return, too busy practicing the speeches they'd give when she took her rightful place. I didn't hate them for loving her. I hated that they needed me until the moment they didn't. That inheritance party wasn't just a betrayal. It was confirmation. No matter what I built, no matter how I saved them, they would always choose the daughter who burned everything down over the daughter who saved it. And that was the moment I stopped being their foundation and started becoming their reckoning. My father gripped the envelope knuckles, turning white as he tore it open. For a moment, his eyes skimmed the page. Then his expression twisted shock, denial, then raw fury. He looked at me like I'd committed a felony. "Where did you get this?" he snarled. The room went still. Everyone leaned closer, pretending not to stare, but absolutely staring. Mom snatched the document from him, scanning it with trembling hands. This is the power of attorney packet. No, this can't be, Richard. You didn't actually sign. Of course I didn't, Dad barked, even though the signature was unmistakably his. This is INVALID. Audrey stood up too quickly, nearly knocking over her champagne flute. What is she trying to say? That she owns everything? That's ridiculous. I folded my arms. I'm not trying to say anything. I'm showing you what you signed. My father slammed his palm onto the table, rattling silverware. You manipulated us during a medical crisis. The hypocrisy would have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. You were conscious, I said, voice even. You passed the cognitive exam. You answered every question. You knew exactly what you were signing. Mom's lips flattened into a thin line, that same face she made when Audrey failed rehab twice, or when Dad's company stock dropped, or when my presence ruined a photo. You will weaponize our signatures against us, she hissed. You weaponized me long before this, I replied. A few cousins gasped softly. Audrey stepped closer, jabbing a finger toward me. You're jealous. That's what this is. You couldn't stand that Dad finally gave me something. You couldn't stand that I'm the heir. I laughed, genuinely laughed, the sound slicing across the room. Yeah. I tilted my head. You left for 5 years without a word. You overdosed twice. You pawned Mom's jewelry for cash. And now you magically show up and suddenly you're the leader of a medical diagnostics empire. Audrey's face flushed red. That was the past, exactly, I said. The past. As in what you run from every time life gets hard. My father roared LANA. ENOUGH. No, I said. For 29 years I've been quiet, loyal, useful. But that ended the second you pretended I never saved your lives. Mom tried to regain control with a brittle smile. Sweetheart, can we please speak privately? No, I repeated. Because you made the announcement publicly. So we're finishing it publicly. Murmurs erupted. This is uncomfortable. Should we leave? No, this is getting good. Dad pointed at the door. You walk out right now and you walk out of this family forever. There it was. Their favorite weapon. The threat they dangled over my childhood like a guillotine. I slid my coat over my shoulders. Okay, I said. Audrey blinked. Wait, let Mom's jaw drop. Lena, don't be stupid. But I wasn't stupid. I was finally done. I walked toward the exit heels echoing across the hardwood. Halfway there, I paused and turned back. They all looked so small from where I stood. Small and scared and suddenly aware that the daughter they underestimated had teeth. You shouldn't have taught me how to survive without you, I said. Then I opened the door and walked out, not broken, not afraid, but free. Freedom is expensive. The morning after the inheritance party, I learned just how much it would cost me. At 8:12 a.m., my bank app locked me out. At 8:40, my employer emailed me saying my position was no longer necessary. At 9:05, my apartment door code stopped working. Every lifeline my parents controlled was severed in under 2 hours. The message was clear: leave the family, lose everything. But I didn't panic. Shockingly, I felt lighter. My friend Nora let me crash on her fold-out couch in a tiny Minneapolis walk up with squeaky floors and a dog upstairs that barked at ghosts. It wasn't the estate mansion, but it was the first place in my life where I didn't have to apologize for existing. Building a new life, I rented a dusty studio across the river-cracked walls, buzzing heater, and a view of a brick alley. But it was mine. I took a job at a small community clinic doing admin work. Not glamorous, not prestigious, but honest. During the day, I processed invoices and patient assistance requests. At night, I sat under a flickering lamp reviewing documents I had quietly saved from my parents' company. Old balance sheets, suspicious loan applications, emails about creative expense routing. Pieces of a puzzle I didn't realize existed until now. The more I read, the more my stomach twisted. My parents had been drowning the company in secret debt for years. And the only reason we survived during Dad's medical crisis was because I rebuilt half the operational system myself. But that wasn't the worst part. Hidden inside a mislabeled folder was a draft press release, financial irregularities discovered under the oversight of Lena Caldwell. I stared at it for a full minute. Then another. Then another. They had planned to scapegoat me long before that inheritance party. They praised Audrey as the heir while quietly preparing me to take the fall. I closed the laptop, my chest hollow and burning at the same time. So this is who they really are, I whispered into the silence. Not family, not caretakers, not leaders, just people willing to sacrifice the daughter who stayed to protect the daughter who ran. Elias returns a week later. My phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. Lena, it was Elias Harrington, the forensic consultant who once helped me restructure some of Dad's finances during his recovery. I need to see you, he said. It's urgent. My pulse kicked. Within an hour, I was in his small office above a law firm surrounded by spreadsheets and printed emails. Elias slid a folder toward me. These are the files you saved from the company. I analyzed them. He looked up, expression grave. Lena, your parents weren't just mismanaging money. They were hiding assets, laundering revenue through fake vendors, and moving funds offshore using the authority you had under the POA. My chest clenched. They used my signature. They used your access, Elias said. But here's the real problem. He pulled out one final document, a board resolution draft. Initiate internal investigation into CFO delegate Lena Caldwell. They weren't going to wait until I left. They were always planning to blame me. I laughed, an empty, broken sound. They wanted Audrey to inherit the company clean, I said. And they wanted me to take the stain. Elias nodded. You're the only one who didn't participate. That makes you dangerous. I set the papers down, my hands suddenly steady. Well, I said quietly, then maybe it's time they learn why the daughter they underestimated is the one they should have feared. Before I continue, thank you for staying with me through this turning point. If you've ever rebuilt yourself from nothing or discovered the truth behind someone's betrayal, your gentle support through a like, comment, share, or even a quiet subscribe truly means more than I can express. I'm grateful you're here with me. Elias's office looked like a war room by the time we finished. Stacks of invoices, vendor lists, wire transfers, loan applications, hidden accounts, encrypted emails, deleted drafts recovered from the servers I once renovated myself. We spent nights cross-referencing every detail until the story became painfully clear my parents weren't incompetent. They weren't careless. They were deliberate. They'd been siphoning money for years, patching holes with fraudulent vendors and slush accounts. And every time the company almost collapsed, I unknowingly cleaned up just enough for them to keep stealing. They didn't reward me for saving them. They resented me for witnessing it. On the fourth night, Elias dropped the final folder onto the table. This is the last piece. Inside were the overseas transfers to the Caldwell Recovery Fund, the account Audrey managed. The one they pretended was funding rehabilitation centers, except the money never reached a treatment facility. Not a dollar. It went straight into a Cayman account under a shell corporation Audrey didn't even create. My father did. I exhaled slowly through my nose. They were preparing everything for her return and preparing me to take the fall. Elias nodded. And tomorrow they'll make it public. I blinked. Tomorrow he turned his laptop toward me. The Whitmore Now Caldwell Foundation website was open and a banner glowed at the top. Annual Winter Gala Live announcement regarding leadership transition. My stomach dropped. They're going to accuse you on stage, Elias said. In front of donors, executives, the press, everyone. My hands curled slowly into fists. They're going to ruin your name before you can expose them. I stared at the banner, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. If you don't speak first, you're done. They'll bury you tonight. Be ready. Attached was a photo of my father holding a prepared statement. My mother adjusting her gown. Audrey smiling like she'd already inherited the world. I closed my eyes. Then I opened them with a clarity I'd never felt before. I'm going, I said. Elias blinked. Lena, it won't be safe. That's what they said about staying. He studied my face. And you're sure? I nodded. They stripped me of everything that tied me to them money, housing, career. They wanted me powerless. But they made a mistake, I added softly. They forgot the moment they pushed me out, I stopped having anything to lose. Elias let out a breath and leaned back. Then we prepare. Suited for war, I didn't have a designer dress. I didn't have a stylist. I didn't have a driver or a limousine. Just a matty black thrift store dress and a binder full of truths they never expected me to hold. As I zipped the binder shut, Elias placed a hand on it. This isn't just proof, he said. It's a weapon. No, I corrected. It's a mirror. Tonight, they get to see themselves clearly for the first time. I slipped on my coat, feeling the weight of the evidence against my ribs. This was no longer about inheritance, or fairness, or approval. This was about every night I patched their mess. Every insult disguised as advice. Every time they said Audrey deserved more. This was justice. Or something sharper. The gala, the Caldwell estate, glowed like a cathedral when I arrived. Tall glass walls, gold lighting, winter roses lining the steps. Inside, a string quartet played elegantly under chandeliers. Donors sipped champagne. Executives shook hands. Cameras flashed. And there they were, my father rehearsing his speech with a grin. My mother basking in compliments. Audrey wearing a diamond necklace she didn't earn. I inhaled and stepped into the ballroom. Not quietly, not timidly, but like storm clouds finally arriving where they belong. The ballroom quieted as my father stepped onto the stage, gripping the microphone with that familiar, smug authority. Ladies and gentlemen, he began tonight, we must address an unfortunate matter within our family. A matter concerning me? I said loudly, stepping forward. The crowd turned so sharply that it felt like the entire room tilted. Audrey's smile fell off her face. My mother froze with one hand on her pearl necklace. Dad stared at me like I was a ghost, or worse, a threat he underestimated for too long. I walked to the center of the ballroom heels, striking the marble like a countdown. My father growled into the Michelina, "This is not your place, that's funny," I said, because for years you said this entire family would fall apart without me. A few donors whispered. Someone near the back muttered, "What's going on?" Dad cleared his throat. "Security, no." I held up a hand. "You're going to want to hear this." "Everyone is." My mother forced a brittle smile. "Sweetheart, you're confused." "Sit down. Let us handle this professionally." Professionally. They were about to accuse me of crimes they committed and call it professionalism. I removed a small flash drive from my clutch. "Let's show everyone what professional looks like." I walked up to the AV booth and plugged it in. Before my father could reach me, the screen behind him lit up, and page 1 of the evidence appeared in bold. Vendor ledger, North Elm catering status, non-existent amount, paid $62, zero authorized by O. Caldwell. A ripple of confusion swept the ballroom. Then the next slide. Wire transfers from Caldwell Diagnostics, Shellcore 1882 Audrey Caldwell Offshore Holdings. Audrey let out a strangled sound. "That's not, I clicked again." A PDF email chain filled the screen. "Mom, make sure the routing is done before the quarter closes." "Dad, shift the remaining funds. Lena won't notice." Audrey used the rehab charity again. No one checks those. Gasps. Hands covering mouths. Phones raised to record. My father lunged toward the laptop. "TUNITOFFF. No." My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "Clean. Sharp. I see. This is what you plan to pin on me tonight. The fake vendors. The offshore accounts. The transfers you routed through the PO while I managed your medical crises." I turned to the audience. "You want to know what kind of daughter I was? The one who slept in hospital chairs for weeks. The one who kept their company alive when their debts were about to drown them. The one who fixed what they broke." I tapped the next file. Up flashed the draft press release: "Financial misconduct, traced to CFO delegate Lena Caldwell. Prepared 2 months before the inheritance party." A donor shouted, "My God, they were planning to blame her." Another whispered, "I knew something was wrong when they pushed Audrey so fast." My mother snapped, "These documents are MANIPULATED." "No, Mother," I said quietly. "They're backed up on the company server, and the state auditor's office already has a copy. I submitted it this afternoon." The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Executives cursed. The board chair stood up furious. Audrey stumbled backward, shaking. Dad's face turned a terrifying shade of red. "You are ideas," he shouted at me. I stepped closer, so close I could see the panic in his eyes. "No," I said. "You ruined yourselves." "My mother tried one last time, Lena. Please, we can talk about this privately." I turned to face her. "You made the announcement publicly," I said. "So I ended it publicly." The ballroom fell into stunned silence. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. Then the board chair spoke into his phone. "Get the state compliance team here, NOW." A donor shouted. Shut the foundation down. Reporters surrounded the stage. Security approached my father. My mother collapsed into a chair. Audrey cried into her trembling hands. And I stepped down from the stage, shoulders back, spine straight. For the first time in my life, I walked through a Caldwell event and nobody dared look down on me. They looked or away, because they finally understood the daughter they dismissed was the one holding the matches. And their empire was already burning. The fallout began before the gala lights even cooled. By sunrise, Every major news outlet had plastered the scandal across their front pages. Caldwell Foundation under federal investigation after daughter exposes fraud, live on stage. Heiress Audrey Caldwell linked to offshore accounts. Matriarch Olivia Caldwell implicated in multi-year laundering scheme. My phone buzzed non-stop, reporters, lawyers, friends, distant relatives suddenly concerned. I turned it off. For once the world could spin without me. The Caldwell collapse within 48 hours. The company's primary bank froze all Caldwell accounts. Federal agents seized financial servers. The board voted to remove my father as CEO unanimously. Audrey's offshore holdings were subpoenaed. My mother's rehab charity was banned from operating in state. Their mansion was raided for financial documents. Media vans lined up outside the gate like vultures circling prey. By the end of the week, the Caldwell empire was nothing but smoke drifting across a ruin. The daughter they crowned as heir being investigated. The daughter they tried to bury listed in every article as the whistleblower. Funny how truth rearranges the world. A new identity on my terms. 3 days after the gala, the interim board called me in. They offered me control of the company. A full leadership role. Power beyond anything I ever asked for. You're the only Caldwell the public trusts, the chairwoman said. You saved us. You should lead us. I looked around the boardroom, the same room where I once brought my father coffee, and was told to leave the real work to the adults. No, I said gently. They blinked. No, I didn't expose them to replace them, I said. I exposed them so I could finally walk away. The truth felt weightless, like air after a storm. Building a future of my own, I returned to my tiny studio apartment, cracked walls humming heater thrift store couch. Home. I took a job at a small, independent auditing agency. Not prestigious. Not famous. But full of decent people who valued integrity more than bloodlines. I woke up early. Worked honestly. Walked home with groceries in my arms instead of family expectations on my back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't someone's daughter. I was simply Lena. The final message 2 weeks later, I opened my mailbox to find a single envelope with no return address. Inside was a note in unfamiliar handwriting. Your father kept every letter you ever wrote him. He just never knew how to love you the way you deserve. You made the right choice. No signature. Just truth. I folded the note and tucked it into my coat pocket, not as a wound, but as closure. The ending I chose one evening. I stood on the walkway outside my apartment, watching the city glow against the winter sky. My parents once told me I wasn't a leader. Not strong enough. Not brilliant enough. Not Audrey. But Audrey inherited lies. I inherited myself. For the first time in decades, that was enough. I breathed in the cold air, letting it fill my lungs. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous. I wasn't part of an empire. I was finally free. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If Lena's story touched something familiar, if you have ever broken free from people who underestimated you, your gentle support through a comment, a share, or even a quiet subscribe truly means more than I can express. I'm grateful you walked with me to the very end.